Do this. Rightio. Hello there, and welcome to the Monash Report at 6. I'm your host, Lloyd Butcher, and wow, do we have a big show in store for you with some huge celebrity guests on this fine Saturday evening. For today's special report, the country of discussion is the great Scandinavian country of Norway. So, without further ado, please welcome to the program our celebrity guests tonight, joining us all the way from Norway, Will Christie-Johnston, also known as CJ.
G'day, Lloyd. Thanks for having me on the show. Your show is something I've had on my bucket list for a long time now, and I can't wait to be a part of it.
Wow, that's such nice words from such a prominent figure as yourself, CJ. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And the other celebrity joining us tonight, also in Norway, is the ever delightful Morgan Anthony.
Hi guys, so happy to be part of the report and to talk about this wonderful country I have the pleasure to reside in.
You are very lucky, that's for sure, Morgan. We are very happy to have you joining us tonight. So, before we get into this, I would like to acknowledge our sponsor, the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, also known as DFAT, to which we bring you this report as part of the Australian National Department of Young Scholarly Researchers Group. The purpose of this report was to develop a profile presentation for DFAT on Norway to provide to Australian firms that may look to expand into Norway. Norway is a country located in Northern Europe along the Western Scandinavian Peninsula and is neighboured by Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Norway has a population of 5.4 million people, and the local currency is the krone, which currently 1 krone exchanges for 16 cents Australian. The main industry within Norway is oil and gas, which accounts for 20% of the economy. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get straight into it. Don't want to go over time, or else my director might give me the chop. So, over to our celebrity guest with the first question of the night. What were the positive and negative effects of globalisation upon Norway?
Great question, Lloyd. Obviously, this was something that we studied heavily, so I'll define globalisation for our viewers at home. It is the spread of transplanetary, which in other words is where there is a reduction in barriers between the social contacts around the world. What this results in is better quality, better ability to trade with countries around the world. So countries can attain resources and products from other countries that have an abundance of these resources. One clear positive from globalization is that Norway was able to connect to developing countries and other countries that they previously couldn't. This, which drove up the oil and gas prices and production amounts, as every country around the world needs these commodities to operate. This can be seen in the graph here, which shows how Norway's terms of goods traded increased substantially in comparison to the other Nordic countries, mainly due to the increase in the oil and gas production and prices.
Another key positive which we found for Norway was the newfound ability to import from countries where previously they couldn't due to barriers between the countries that globalisation removed. As seen in the accompanying table, during the process of globalisation, Norway moved away from importing from the EU-15, which were the European member countries at the time, seen in a 6.5% reduction in importing from these countries between 1995 and 2005. Consequently, at the same time, they moved to increasing their imports from developing countries in Asia by 4.4%. These countries include India, Malaysia, and Thailand, all which are substantially further away from the EU-15, but offer cheaper goods. However, one negative effect of globalisation was it gave other countries cheaper alternatives around the world to import from. This is because at the time, and still to this day, Norway has high wages and price levels in the country. Whilst seen earlier that Norway increased the trade of goods, this was mainly due to oil and gas, but other industries within the country were imported by other countries elsewhere due to the fact that they could source these products from industries for cheaper prices.
Great response to that question. So overall, would you say Norway was a winner or loser from globalisation, Morgan?
Overall, from our research, we can conclude that Norway was very much a winner from globalisation. due to the increase in prices and production for their main industry or export within the country, that's oil and gas. On top of this, they were able to source imports from other countries, which reduced the price they paid for imports. While some of the other industries saw their demand for the product from other countries reduced due to competition from other cheaper countries, overall, the positives severely outweighed the negatives.
Very thorough overall response there. And after reading your response the other day, I noticed that you mentioned a lot about economic and human development. So what was your analysis on the level of both these measures in Norway?
My field in particular on this topic was focused more around economic development, so I can start and touch on that. In regards to Norway and the economic development, there were two key measures we looked at, and they were the gross national income per capita, known as GNI, and purchasing power parity, known as triple P. In these two measures, Norway ranks 4th for GNI and 7th for triple P. This is important for an Australian firm considering establishing a presence in the country, as it is a good indicator of the levels of disposable income in the country, and therefore the potential level of consumption that can be expected from the market. Profitability is a crucial aspect when expanding into a foreign country, which is why economic development is so vital. Furthermore, economic development also impacts how stable the economy is, which means the firm can be confident when investing into the Norwegian economy, as it is well established and developed, which should make the economy more predictable and less volatile. CJ, do you want to talk about human development?
Of course. So when we were measuring human development, we used the Human Development Index, known as HDI. As we can see in this table, Norway ranked number 1 in the world in regards to HDI. This is an important measure of human development in a country, which is also important for an Australian firm to consider when expanding into Norway. Human development is relevant as it measures things such as education levels, which are important when looking to hire local workers. Human development is also a vital indicator of what potential the country has for future growth and opportunity by measuring what level of opportunities the people within the economy have. GNI and PPP, used to measure the economic development of the country, have limitations and drawbacks in comparison, as the numbers do not account for instances such as wealth classes and future growth prospects. The HDI index is a much more rounded measure of the conditions in the economy, as it incorporates additional factors as well as GNI and PPP, and is therefore likely more useful to an Australian firm as information to consider when determining establishing a presence in Norway.
So in terms of these two measures, which would you say is of greater importance for an Australian firm that is looking to establish a presence within Norway?
Both economic development and human development are of importance to the economy, as there is a two-way relationship that exists between the two factors, in which strong economic development helps create strong human development, and strong human development also leads to strong economic development.
A very thorough response to our economic and human developments in both countries. Obviously, your report looked very heavily into the culture and the difference between Norway and Australia in terms of this. So, if I was a business person looking to expand my business from Australia into Norway, what is a cultural distance between these two countries?
There are many cultural differences and similarities between Norway and Australia. A major difference is Norway's focus on anti-urban ideologies. The government has applied a high level of services and amenities in the less populated areas, and so in turn have a low population rate in urban communities. And that's a huge difference when compared to Australia. Another major point is that Norway's crime rates are exceptionally lower than Australia's, due to their legal system focusing more on rehabilitation than punishment like Australia. Australia has 57% more crime than Norway, but in saying that, Norway has a much smaller population. Norway's natives are the Sami peoples, and Norway also has a specific Sami parliament that's situated in Karasjok in Finnmark that deals with all matters that concern the Sami people. Similarly, in Australia, there's a Koori court that deals with all matters that concern local Aborigine peoples.
I actually really enjoyed this part of the report to see how similar cultures are in both Norway and Australia. So, feeding off this point, Are Australia and Norway becoming more similar or more disparate, in your professional opinion?
The two countries are very different from each other in their judicial system, government, ideologies, and more. Although there's significant similarities between the countries, they're more disparate. And this is backed up by the Hofstede theory.
In terms of the Hofstede theory, one factor is power distance. Both countries scored low on this, meaning that the countries prioritize independence and hierarchy isn't super important. Power is decentralized. Control is disliked, and managers and higher-ups are addressed informally. Another factor is individualism. Australia scored a 90, meaning that it's generally a society where everyone is expected to look after themselves and their family being self-driven. Also shows that when hiring, you're promoted depending on what you can do. But in Norway, it's slightly lower at 69, demonstrating that employees and employer relationships are based on contracts and that communication is direct. In terms of masculinity, Norway scored an 8, and this is the second most feminine country, meaning that the stereotypically softer values are more important and there isn't a big value for the environment. Whereas Australia is considered more masculine, meaning that values are to be the best and that the winner takes all ideals.
With uncertainty avoidance, both countries scored 50 to 51, which implies that they don't have a set ideal on whether to control the future or let it happen. They don't really have a preference. Another factor is long-term orientation. Both countries score fairly low in this section, showing that both have a fairly normative culture than pragmatic. The final factor is indulgence. Norway has a score of 55, showing that they can sway either way. They, again, don't really have a preference. But Australia has a score of 71, and this shows that Australia is a very indulgent country. They place a higher importance on leisure and free time, wanting to complete impulses and desires in order to enjoy life and have fun. They respect traditions and focus on getting quick results. Over all of the 6 factors, the countries had very different scores, only being similar in uncertainty avoidance and power distance. This demonstrates how different the countries are.
That's very interesting. I actually thought that the countries were a lot more similar than they were, but that's good to see. The final stage of the report looked at the arguments of David Ricardo and which industries Norway should specialise in to trade with other countries. Would you guys like to explain what you found in regards to this?
Sure. David Ricardo argued that a country should export products that they can produce more efficiently than others and specialise in. In the case of Norway, they have an abundance of natural resources somewhat unique to the country that they can take advantage of and focus on exporting and trading with other countries. Norway has a large natural supply of fuels, which is why it is the country's #1 export and comprises nearly half the country's total exports. Another one of Norway's largest export industries is fresh fish, and they are one of the world's largest suppliers of fresh fish. In line with Ricardo's theory, Norway should and is specialising in these industries where they have a natural advantage. They can capitalise on the large volume of resources in these industries and export and trade with countries who do not have the same access to oil and fresh fish.
And I understand you did the same thing for Australia. What should Australia specialise in terms of trade to other countries?
Similarly, using the Ricardo theory, Australia should focus on the production and export of those resources that have a natural abundance in Australia. This includes materials such as iron ore, coal, gas, and gold, which Australia has natural endowment in. Due to having access to a large volume of these resources that other countries do not, Australia should specialise in these products and trade them with other countries who do not share the same access to these products naturally. This is reflected in Australia's emphasis on the mining industry and specialisation in the creation of these products, as they are more efficient at doing so than in other countries around the world. I think a key point about this is that both Norway and Australia exhibit the resource utilisation component of Ricardo's theory and showcase how you can use a natural advantage in resource abundance to create a strong export industry and trade to create prosperity.
So We're into the end of your report now, and you came to a conclusion in this report as to whether you thought Australian businesses should expand into Norway. What was the end result of this that you came up with after weighing out the points discussed within this report?
Well, Lloyd, overall, we believe that it is not beneficial to expand a business from Australia into Norway. This is due to the fact that Norway has high wage levels, which are not competitive with other countries. They have a significant cultural distance when compared against each other, and they're also geologically very far away from each other. Even though both countries have significant oil and fish markets and industries, both of these industries within Norway are very saturated, and it would be very difficult for a new business to get a foothold within the market. Therefore, due to these reasons, we can quite comfortably say that expanding a business from Australia into Norway would not be a smart or profitable move for an Australian business.
Well, I think that was a great conclusion to what wrapped up a very great report. And on that note, what a great report it was today. I must say, I think it was one of my favourite and most informative reports we've had on the show. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to spend the past 20 minutes with you two legends of the field, and I hope that someday we can do this again.
Thanks for having us for the day, Lloyd. And I think I can speak for both Morgan and myself in saying the pleasure was all ours.
Yeah, thanks Lloyd for letting us be on the show. Had a great time. CJ hit the nail on the head. The pleasure was all ours.
You two are too kind to me. Thanks both Morgan and CJ for coming on the show. Well, that concludes what was a great episode today on the Monash Report. We are looking forward to seeing you again next week at 6, where we discuss about how COVID-19 has affected the world's economy and how Australia plans to move forward once we come out on the other side. So I thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next week. This is Lloyd Butcher, over and out.